Hey everyone, and welcome to the Rhythm Trees. My name is Chris Stevenson, and the reason I am making this video today is for those musicians of you who have already learned how to learn music by ear and feel, but may not have the theoretical side of things, or for those of you who are just starting out with any instrument. So when I say any instrument, I'm a drummer. I'm going to be teaching you rhythm. However, any instrument is able to learn this, unless you're a guitar player, because guitar players don't usually like to learn this stuff. Don't worry, I got you, bass players. So what we're going to learn in this video is essentially musical jargon, a bit of theory, and how these two sides actually come together. So let's look at some precursory definitions here. So what exactly is a beat? A beat is a rhythmic pulse. Now let's take a look at what a note is. In music, a note is a symbol denoting a musical sound. Notes can represent the pitch and duration of a sound in musical notation. Since a beat is represented by a note, let's look at subdivision within the rhythm tree. Subdivision. Beginning hierarchically with a whole note and rhythmically breaking down into smaller notes within the same time frame. Now, how do we fit all these notes together? We use what's called a bar or a measure. Both terms mean the same thing. In American music, measure is more commonly used, while bar is preferred in other English-speaking countries. Generally, musicians should be acquainted with both terms. In musical notation, a bar or measure is a segment of time corresponding to a specific number of beats in which each beat is represented by a particular note value and the boundaries of the bar are indicated by vertical bar lines. Now a quarter note represents our metronome, so we're going to get to that shortly. But let's look at the metronome. A metronome is a mechanical or electrical instrument that makes repeated clicking sounds at an adjustable pace, used for making rhythm, and is most commonly used with 4 quarter notes within one measure. We now have a basic understanding how everything fits together and how we stay on time. But how do we increase the tempo of that time frame? We use what's called beats per minute, or BPM. BPM is a term for measuring the tempo of a piece of music. Tempo is a musical term for the pace or speed of a piece. Beats per minute is the unit of measurement for measuring tempo. So before I play these notes for you, we're going to go through them and I'm going to explain each note value and how it correlates to the quarter note and the metronome. So we're going to start with the root of all trees, the whole note. The whole note represents the value of 4 beats within one measure. So we would play the first beat and hold it for 4 beats. So a half note is our first subdivision of the whole note, which is represented by 2 half notes. That would be played on the 1 and held until the 3, and then played again on the 3 until the bar repeats. So while the whole note is our foundation of time itself, a quarter note represents our pulse as musicians and is also represented with the metronome. So while you're watching this video, let's take some time to download a metronome app. There's so many free ones online. I'm using the Gap Click by Benny Greb. So before we actually play through these and I show you how they work to the metronome and all the subdivisions within a bar line, I'm just going to finish explaining all the subdivisions. So I like to look at this tree system as numbers 1 to 8. Starting with the quarter note and going through all of the subdivisions from 1 to 8 that are based off the quarter note. So as musicians, this is like our musical heartbeat. So next up, our quarter notes subdivide into 8th notes. So essentially we have 2 notes per quarter note, and we count this as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So the next subdivision we're going to look at, which is number 3, is going to be triplets. So triplets aren't subdivided by 8th notes. However, we are essentially going to be borrowing an 8th note from the tree and putting 3 groups of 8th notes per quarter note. For our groupings of 4 per quarter note, these are 16th notes. So 8th notes actually subdivide into 16th notes. And we count these as 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. So now that we have a general understanding of our numbers 1 to 4 right now, with groupings of 1, 2, 3, 4, to the quarter note pulse. Now let's look at 5 to 8. So the next subdivision after 16th notes would be quintuplets. So quintuplets are groups of 5 16th notes per quarter note. So imagine we're going to borrow 16th notes from the tree and put a grouping of 5 16th notes per quarter note. So in one bar, we're going to have 20 16th notes. So there's many different ways to count quintuplets. We can use syllables by saying university, or takadima-di. However, I have my own counting system that I'm going to share with you once we play through this tree system of 1 to 8. So now if we look at number 6, these are called sextuplets. So now we have a grouping of 6 16th notes per quarter notes. We have 24 16th notes in one bar. I like to look at these as crushing a group of 3 16th notes between the one and the and then another 3 16th notes between the and the next quarter note. So I like to count these as 1 triplet and triplet, 2 triplet and triplet, 3 triplet and triplet, 4 triplet and triplet. So septuplets, just like 5 and 6, are groups of 7 16th notes per quarter note. So now we have 28 16th notes. Again, there's many different ways we can count this. There's listen to the radio. Okay, yeah, sorry, I forgot how my syllables and hands work. And then we also have taka, taka, dim. Taka, taka, dima, yeah, taka, taka, dima, di. There we go. But then again, you can use these. However, I have my own counting system that I will share with you shortly. So now when we get to number 8, this is where our subdivision actually changes. Just like 8th notes change to groupings of 16th notes, and now for 8 we have groups of 8 per quarter note. But just like the sextuplets, I like to look at these as I'm using the 8th note as my anchor to the next quarter note. So these are called 32nd notes. So what they essentially are is our 16th notes then subdivide, so 2 groupings for each 16th note, to 32nd notes. So they're their own subdivision, but essentially I like to look at that as squishing 4 32nd notes between the one and the and then another 4 32nd notes between the and the next quarter note. So 32nd notes are actually super easy to count and play. It's just easier to show you than to describe. However, essentially what I do is as I'm playing, I count 16th notes, but I play 2 groupings per 16th note. So that being said, we're now going to play the tree system. All right, so now we're going to play through the subdivisions from 1 to 8. So 1 being our quarter note pulse, which is also the pulse of the metronome. So the metronome is going to be set to a tempo of 60 beats per minute. So before we start playing these, I'm going to describe my personal favorite way of counting these. So if we look at numbers 1 to 8, we have 4 odd numbers and 4 even numbers. So the odd numbers being 1, 3, 5, and 7, and the even numbers being 2, 4, 6, and 8. So with the odd numbers, we're going to have almost like a skipping motion. So it's going to go from side to side. We're going to lead with our right side and then lead with our left side every other quarter note. Now with the even numbers, the side that we started with, if we're alternating, will always be on the side we started with per quarter note. So if that's a bit confusing to you now, let's try it. And we're going to play through it, and then I want you to try it on your own. All right, so here we go. So that was me playing from quarter notes to 8th notes to triplets to 16th notes to quintuplets to sextuplets to septuplets and then 32nd notes. So how do I count these? What I like to do is I like to look at all of my odd numbers as a diminished 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now all my even numbers are an even 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to describe that to you. So if I'm doing my quarter notes, that's almost like a 1 that's kind of like a skip from side to side, and then a 1 that's more of like a march on the quarter note. So I'm going to show you an example with quarter notes and 8th notes. So I'll have my odd 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Those are my quarter notes per quarter note. Now my 8th notes are groups of 2 per quarter note, but I like to look at this as an even 1. 1, 1, 1. Now, so on and so forth. With triplets, I like to look at that as an odd 2. And then with 16th notes, those are an even 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So essentially, the odd numbers are going to lead on each side per quarter note. So I'm skipping from 1, 2, 3, 4 versus marching on 1, 2, 3, 4. So essentially with every odd number, I like to skip every other note. So that's my odd counting system, where I'll show you now with quintuplets and sextuplets. With 5, instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the 3 and the 4, I like to count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So now I have an odd 3 on my right side and an odd 3 on my left side. And now every time it goes back to the 1, all the odd numbers are going to kind of skip back to the 1, as opposed to the even numbers always land evenly throughout the bar line and back onto the 1. So let's look at 5 and 6 as an example. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now 6. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So for 7 and 8, I like to look at this as an odd 4 and an even 4. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like I described before in this video, with 30-second notes, I actually have groups of 2. So another way you can count this, which might be more efficient for some people, is counting 16th notes, but we just double it up. 1, E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and 4, E, and. So essentially what I'm doing there is my right hand is now counting an even 16th note pulse. So there we have it. Now I'm going to perform this tree system 1 to 8 with my counting system to the metronome. So I like to look at all of these subdivisions as the main rhythmic subdivisions that we use in contemporary music. So please subscribe if you would like to see some future content describing each aspect of what I've explained today. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you've liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe so you can see future content.